There are creatures in the galaxy that even the bravest warriors fear, but no one expected that humans would be their worst nightmare. For centuries, the Wrath Tsar ruled space with iron claws. Entire civilizations vanished under their war fleets, their planets reduced to silent, empty husks. To speak their name was to invite terror. To fight them was to embrace death. Every species learned to submit or be destroyed. Even Captain Yarrick, a seasoned veteran of war, feared them. His homeworld had been spared only because they paid the Wrath Tsar tribute, rare minerals, slaves, and endless groveling. He had seen what happened to those who resisted. They did not die quickly. So when Yarrick heard that the Wrath Tsar had turned their attention to a backwater planet called Earth, he sighed. It would be another short war. A few weeks, at most. Humans, after all, were an unknown race. They had never fought in galactic wars, never expanded beyond their solar system. The Wrath Tsar would tear through them like they had with every other species. That was the assumption. Then, the first reports arrived. Yarrick had expected to hear the usual news, a swift victory, a new species wiped from history. Instead, the transmission he received was unsettling. A Wrath Tsar commander, one of their finest, was speaking. His voice was shaking. This is wrong. The alien's deep growl had an edge of panic. The humans, they don't fight like we expected. Yarrick frowned. That made no sense. The Wrath Tsar were the apex predators. They had conquered species twice as strong, twice as advanced. The commander hesitated. They're learning. Adapting. It's unnatural. Yarrick's blood ran cold. The screen flickered, revealing battle footage. At first, it looked as expected, human soldiers firing weapons, holding their ground. But then, something changed. The second wave of Wrath Tsar forces advanced, using their standard tactics, brute force, overwhelming numbers. It was a strategy that had worked for centuries. But the humans were ready. Instead of breaking, they had shifted tactics mid-battle. New formations. New strategies. They were countering Wrath Tsar attacks within minutes. Yarrick had never seen anything like it. The transmission cut to a captured Wrath Tsar soldier, one of their elite warriors. His mandibles twitched as he whispered, "They are the real monsters." Yarrick's pulse quickened. For the first time in history, the Wrath Tsar were afraid. Then, the final message came. A priority distress signal from a high-ranking Wrath Tsar officer. His voice was filled with terror. They do not break. His breath was ragged. They do not run. They are something else. Yarrick's hands clenched into fists. The galaxy's apex predators had finally met their match. And for the first time, the universe learned to fear something new. Humans. The Wrath Tsar had never lost a war. Not once. They had faced empires with planet-killer weapons, species twice their size, civilizations older than recorded time. And every single one of them had fallen. That was why the High Command was furious when the first reports of resistance from Earth arrived. Supreme Commander Vorzal stared at the holographic projection before him. The latest battle statistics scrolled across the screen, numbers flickering in real time. Casualties, Wrath Tsar, 6,382. Casualties, humans, 923. Vorzal's claws dug into the steel armrest of his command chair. His warriors were stronger. Their weapons were superior. Their technology was centuries ahead of humanity's primitive machines. And yet, the humans weren't just resisting. They were winning. The High Council demanded answers. How was an inferior species holding their ground? Vorzal didn't have answers. But he knew one thing, this would not stand. The invasion begins. The Wrath Tsar assembled their greatest war fleet. Thousands of ships, bristling with weapons, descended upon Earth in a coordinated strike. They targeted every major city, every military base, every power structure. Their plan was simple: shock and awe. They had used it 100 times before. The first wave would bomb strategic locations, causing chaos. The second wave would land ground forces and wipe out all remaining resistance. And yet, from the moment they arrived, something felt wrong. The humans should have panicked. They should have surrendered. Instead, they fought like demons. Unexpected resistance. Vorzal's forces landed in New Chicago, expecting to face a broken people. What they found instead was hell. Human snipers took out Rathzar officers with deadly precision. Ambushes erupted from the shadows, catching entire squads off guard. Tanks and aircraft maneuvered unpredictably, striking and vanishing before the Rathzar could counterattack. And the worst part? The humans adapted. Every strategy the Rathzar used was countered within hours. They changed battle formations, switched up tactics, used psychological warfare. Vorzal's forces found themselves hunted. Fear in the ranks. Vorzal watched a live feed from one of his battalions. A squad of Rathzar warriors had cornered a group of human soldiers in an abandoned building. The warriors, towering over their enemies, snarled in anticipation. This was how it always ended: primitive creatures backed into a corner, begging for mercy. But the humans weren't afraid. They stood there, calm, waiting. Then, the lights went out. A second later, gunfire erupted from the darkness. Shadows flickered. Silhouettes moved impossibly fast. One by one, the Rathzar fell. The last surviving warrior screamed into his helmet's communicator. They're not fighting fair," he shrieked. The transmission cut out. Vorzal's blood ran cold. For the first time in his life, he realized something terrifying. The humans were not prey. They were hunters. Prisoners speak of nightmares. The next day, a group of captured Rathzar soldiers was brought before human interrogators. They had been taken alive, not as trophies, but as study subjects. Interrogator Colonel Dean Carter sat across from the highest-ranking prisoner, an officer named Kralzar. Kralzar was no coward. He had led countless planetary invasions. He had never feared an enemy before. And yet, as he sat in the dimly lit room, his claws trembled. "Tell me," Carter said, leaning forward. "What's wrong, big guy?" Kralzar exhaled slowly, mandibles clicking in distress. "You, humans. You don't break. You don't flee. You don't fight like any species we have ever faced." He looked up, his black eyes narrowing. "It is unnatural." Carter smirked. "You thought we'd roll over, huh? Just like the others?" Kralzar hesitated. Then, he said something that sent a chill through the room. "No. We thought we were the monsters of the galaxy." He leaned closer. "But you are something worse." Carter's smirk faded. "Something worse?" Final scene, cliffhanger for Part 3. Deep in space, Vorzal stood aboard his warship, looking down at Earth. His forces were crumbling. The invasion was failing. His advisors urged retreat. But Vorzal refused. The Rathzar did not run. "They think they can hunt us," he growled. "Then let's see how they handle being the prey." He turned to his officers. "Deploy the elite warbands. No more mercy." As the warbands descended toward Earth, something in Vorzal's gut told him he had made a mistake. But by the time he realized what it was, it would already be too late. For the first time in their history, the Rathzar were losing. Not because of superior weapons. Not because of numbers. But because humanity refused to play by the rules. Vorzal watched from his command ship as his forces struggled on Earth. Every standard battle formation was countered. Every attack was anticipated. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were learning. The Rathzar were apex predators, the terror of the galaxy. Yet now they were the ones being hunted. And it was only getting worse. The elite warbands arrive. Determined to reclaim control, Vorzal deployed his elite warbands, the deadliest warriors in Rathzar history. Hand-picked from birth, these warriors were the best of the best. They had raised entire planets, crushed rebellions, and never once failed a mission. Their objective? Eliminate the human resistance. No more strategies. No more mind games. Pure, ruthless extermination. As their drop ships burned through Earth's atmosphere, the warbands prepared themselves. They had heard the whispers. The fear. The impossible stories. Humans are different. Humans don't break. But they dismissed it as nonsense. They would crush this pathetic species and restore the Rathzar's dominance. Or so they thought. The disappearance. The first warband landed outside New Chicago, moving in perfect formation. Their orders were simple: kill every human soldier in sight. And then, they vanished. No distress signals. No transmissions. Just silence. Vorzal clenched his mandibles. "Where are they?" he growled. His officers scrambled for answers. Radar scans showed no trace of the squad. Heat signatures? Gone. It was as if they had been erased from existence. A second warband was dispatched to investigate. They, too, vanished. Vorzal's claws tightened around his chair. This was wrong. The Rathzar were the predators. The universe's nightmare. But somehow, the humans had turned the hunt around. The survivor's story. Hours later, a single distress signal crackled through the void. A lone elite warband warrior had survived. His breathing was ragged, his voice barely above a whisper. We were not prepared," he gasped. Vorzal leaned forward. "What happened?" The warrior coughed, his mandibles clicking in terror. "They knew we were coming. They didn't fight us head-on. They waited." A chill ran through Vorzal's veins. "Explain," he ordered. The warrior's voice trembled. "They hunted us." The line cut out. The last thing Vorzal heard was a single human voice in the background, calm and steady. "Welcome to our jungle. Psychological warfare begins." That night, something changed. Rathzar troops reported strange occurrences across the battlefield. Weapons disappeared in the dead of night. Troops went missing without a sound. Shadowy figures moved in the darkness, never fully seen. Terror spread through the ranks. The Rathzar, for the first time, felt helpless. They weren't fighting an enemy that followed the rules of war. They were fighting a species that thrived in chaos. Vorzal's second-in-command approached him, eyes filled with unease. "Sir, what if we withdraw?" Vorzal snarled. "We do not run." But deep in his gut, he knew something was wrong. The Rathzar were supposed to be the monsters. But humanity had become something else. For centuries, the Rathzar believed themselves to be the galaxy's apex predators. But now? Now they were prey. Vorzal stood motionless on the command deck of his warship, staring at the endless stream of distress signals blinking on the holographic display. Entire squads missing. Elite warbands wiped out. Troops refusing to leave their bunkers at night. This was not war. This was something else. The whispered fear. On the battlefield, something terrifying was happening. Rathzar patrols walked into buildings, and never walked out. Warriors sent into the underground tunnels of human cities, vanished without a trace. Entire platoons abandoned their posts, claiming they were being watched. Then came the whispers. Captured transmissions from the Rathzar comms carried the same fearful phrase, repeated over and over again. "They are hunting us." Vorzal had heard enough. This madness would end. He activated the command line to his remaining ground forces. "Enough of this nonsense. You are Rathzar. You do not fear lesser species. You are the nightmares of the universe." But instead of battle cries, only silence greeted him. Then, finally, a single response crackled through the speakers. It was not what he expected. A Rathzar warrior, voice hollow, whispered. "No, we were never the monsters. They were. Nightfall brings terror." The Rathzar began fortifying their positions. They stopped advancing. Stopped hunting humans. Instead, they built barricades, dug trenches, set up floodlights to keep the darkness at bay. But it didn't matter. Because the humans didn't need the dark. That night, Carter's team struck every major Rathzar base at once. Not with firepower. Not with brute force. But with fear. The floodlights flickered out, one by one. Echoing footsteps were heard where no one stood. Weapons were found without their power cores, stolen right out of Rathzar hands. And then, the voices started. From the shadows, from unseen places, whispers slithered into the Rathzar comms. "How does it feel? To be the hunted? To be afraid?" One warrior, trembling, dropped his weapon and ran. Then another. Then a dozen. Within an hour, entire squads abandoned their posts. Not because they had lost the battle. But because they had lost their minds. The Supreme Commander breaks. Back on his warship, Vorzal's patience had shattered. He turned to his advisors, mandibles twitching with barely contained rage. "Launch the orbital bombardments. Now." The officers hesitated. "Sir, our forces are still planetside." "I said fire." Vorzal roared. But before the order could be carried out, a priority transmission interrupted the command deck. A live video feed. Vorzal's eyes widened. It was the Supreme Commander of the Rathzar homeworld. His mandibles were trembling. His normally stone-cold expression was gone. "Vorzal." The Supreme Commander's voice wavered. They have reached the home system." Vorzal froze. "Who?" The Supreme Commander's next words sent a chill through every officer in the room. "The humans." A stunned silence fell over the bridge. "We intercepted one of their ships," the Supreme Commander continued. "We tried to interrogate them. Do you know what they said?" Vorzal swallowed. "What?" The Supreme Commander exhaled shakily. "They said we never should have come to Earth." For the first time in history, the Rathzar Empire was crumbling. It wasn't just that they were losing ground. They were losing their identity. The nightmares of the galaxy, their warriors, their conquerors, their unstoppable legions, were now the ones afraid. And fear was a disease. It spread. It broke them. The Last War Council. Vorzal stood in the war chamber aboard his flagship, surrounded by his remaining generals. The faces that once held pride and arrogance now held doubt. They had lost half their ground forces. Not to superior firepower. Not to numbers. But to humans who fought like nothing they had ever encountered. Vorzal slammed his fist against the table. "Enough," he snarled. "We will not be hunted like prey." The room fell silent. Then, slowly, his second-in-command Naxtor stepped forward. "Sir," Naxtor hesitated. "We have underestimated them. We must consider retreat." A deep growl built in Vorzal's chest. "Retreat? He took a step toward his officer, towering over him. Do you wish to live as a coward, or die as a warrior? Naxtor's mandibles clicked in frustration. Sir, if we do not withdraw, we will have neither option. The humans. Vorzal drew his blade and cut Naxtor down where he stood. Silence. Blood pooled at their feet. Does anyone else feel the same? Vorzal's voice was low, dangerous. No one spoke. Good, he growled. Then we go to war one last time. The final attack. In a desperate gamble, Vorzal launched the last of his warships in a single, all-or-nothing attack. Earth would either fall, or the Rathzar Empire would die. The plan was simple: destroy humanity's military leadership. Cut off the head. The body will die. A fleet of dreadnoughts plunged toward Earth, carrying their remaining shock troops, war machines, and their most devastating weapon, a planet-buster bomb. If the Rathzar couldn't have Earth, they would make sure no one else did. The Battle of Earth. The final battle began. Explosions lit the sky as Earth's defense forces engaged the Rathzar fleet. Colonel Dean Carter stood at the front lines, watching the storm of firepower rain down from the heavens. But he wasn't afraid. Because he knew the Rathzar had already lost. They just didn't realize it yet. Humanity's secret weapon. As the Rathzar ships descended, Carter gave the order. And from the shadows of space, from Earth's hidden defense stations, the trap was sprung. A fleet of human stealth ships uncloaked, cutting through the Rathzar forces from behind. The aliens never saw it coming. Vorzal's warships, focused on Earth's surface, were suddenly surrounded. The humans had done what no one in the galaxy had ever dared: they had studied the Rathzar. They had learned their weaknesses. And now, they were exploiting them. The fall of Vorzal. Vorzal's flagship trembled as explosions tore through its hull. Sir, our fleet is collapsing, his officers shouted. We have to fall back. Vorzal refused to believe it. He had crushed entire species. He had ruled the stars. No, he growled. We are Rathzar. We. An explosion rocked the bridge, throwing him against the command chair. Smoke filled the air. His empire was dying around him. For the first time in his life, Vorzal felt true fear. And then, a voice cut through the chaos. You should have left us alone. The screen flickered. There, standing on the battlefield, Colonel Carter stared back at him. Vorzal snarled. You think this is over, human? Carter smirked. Oh, it's over. The humans had done what no one else had dared. They had broken the Rathzar. You should have left us alone. Colonel Dean Carter's words echoed in Vorzal's ears as his flagship burned around him. The once mighty Rathzar fleet was in ruins. Their warriors were scattered, broken, terrified. The galaxy's most feared species had been humbled. But Vorzal was not finished. Not yet. His clawed hand slammed onto the final failsafe panel. A last resort. A weapon of absolute destruction. If the Rathzar could not rule, then they would erase humanity from existence. The doomsday weapon. From the wreckage of his fleet, a single ship detached, a dark, monstrous dreadnought, larger than any other vessel in the Rathzar armada. Its name, the Extinction Fong. It carried one payload. A planet cracker bomb, designed to pulverize Earth's core and turn the planet into nothing but floating debris. It was unstoppable. Unavoidable. And it was already on its way. Mission: stop the bomb. Carter stood in Earth's main war room, staring at the data on the monitors. The Extinction Fong was approaching. They had minutes. Can we shoot it down? A general asked. No, Carter replied. It's too heavily shielded. Conventional weapons won't get through in time. The room fell silent. Everyone knew what this meant. If the bomb reached Earth, humanity was finished. Carter took a slow breath. Then he activated his comms. "Get my team in the dropship. We're going up there." Boarding the extinction Fong. With seconds to spare, Carter and a team of elite special forces launched into orbit. The plan? Board the ship. Disable the bomb. Get out alive. Simple. Except nothing about this was simple. As they reached the dreadnought, the ship's automated defenses came online. Gun turrets blazed. Drones swarmed like angry wasps. The dropship shook violently. "Brace!" Carter shouted as the ship crashed onto the enemy hull. The airlock hissed open. The team stormed inside. The final battle. The halls of the extinction Fong were empty. No Rathzar soldiers. No resistance. Just darkness. "This is wrong," one of Carter's men muttered. "Keep moving," Carter ordered. They pushed forward, deeper into the ship, until they reached the bomb's control room. There, waiting for them, was Vorzal. Vorzal's last stand. The Rathzar Supreme Commander stood tall, wounded but still defiant. "You think you've won, human?" Vorzal growled. Carter raised his rifle. "You're out of tricks." Vorzal laughed, a deep, hollow sound. "This was never about victory," he hissed. "It was about sending a message." He stepped aside, revealing the bomb's countdown. 2 minutes and 30 seconds. 2 minutes and 29 seconds. The device was locked. Unstoppable. Carter's pulse pounded. They had less than 3 minutes before Earth was reduced to ash. "If we die, we take you with us," Vorzal sneered. Carter didn't hesitate. He raised his sidearm and shot Vorzal between the eyes. The Rathzar warlord collapsed. But the countdown kept going. The impossible choice. "We need to shut it down," one of Carter's men shouted. Carter ripped open the bomb's control panel. The technology was unlike anything they had ever seen. They couldn't stop it. But maybe, they could move it. Carter turned to the pilot. "Can we redirect this thing?" The pilot's hands flew across the controls. "Maybe. But there's a problem," he hesitated. "Someone needs to manually override the course from inside." "Meaning?" "Someone had to stay behind." Carter didn't blink. "Get out of here." The team froze. "Sir, no. That's an order." Silence. Then, reluctantly, his men saluted. "See you on the other side," one of them said. They ran for the escape shuttle. Carter turned back to the bomb's navigation system. The countdown ticked lower. 45 seconds. 44 seconds. With shaking hands, he steered the extinction Fong away from Earth. Sacrifice and survival. The ship lurched. The engines roared. The bomb, once aimed at Earth, now pointed toward deep space. 10 seconds. 9 seconds. Carter exhaled slowly. This was it. Humanity would live. That's all that mattered. 2 seconds. 1 second. Then. A sudden explosion. Earth watches in silence. From the surface of Earth, billions watched the sky. A blinding light erupted in space, brighter than the sun, tearing across the void. Then, darkness. Static. Silence. The unexpected transmission. As the world mourned, a weak signal crackled through. A video feed flickered to life. Carter, bruised, bleeding, but alive. "Miss me?" he grinned. The war room erupted in cheers. The impossible had happened. Humanity had survived. And the Rathzar? They were finished. The galaxy had always whispered the name of the Rathzar in fear. They were the boogeymen of space. The invincible. The unstoppable. The predators. But that was before humans entered the fold. Now, in every corner of the galaxy, that same name was no longer spoken. Instead, it was replaced by a single word that sent chills down the spines of those who dared to listen. Humanity. The galaxy's response. It started slowly, whispers at first. A few smaller races, once subjugated by the Rathzar, began to take note of the human strength. Their resilience. But then, the full truth started to sink in. The Rathzar, the galaxy's most feared species, had been destroyed by a species with barely a century of space exploration. A species that had no reason to be feared. Until now. Humanity's impact. As Earth recovered from the battle, humans made their presence felt. Not with force, but with innovation. Humanity began sharing its technology, not just weapons, but solutions for things no one had dared to fix. Planetary rejuvenation technologies that healed dying worlds. Medical advancements that extended life and cured diseases once thought incurable. Energy sources that ended wars over resources. Other civilizations watched, stunned, as humans reached out, not to conquer, but to help. But even those who marveled at the human achievements couldn't escape the realization. Humans could be ruthless, too. The gathering storm. For the first time since the Rathzar's invasion, Colonel Dean Carter stood before a galactic assembly, this time not as a soldier, but as a symbol of humanity's strength. There was a quiet sense of pride in the room. But also a recognition of the responsibility humanity now carried. Carter knew that the universe would never forget what humans had done. He could feel it, the weight of what came next. With the fall of the Rathzar, new alliances were forming. Some were eager. Some were fearful. Some were already planning their next move. But there was something in Carter's eyes that made it clear. No one would dare threaten humanity. The final message. The leaders of the galaxy watched as a galactic council was formed, led by representatives from every species, including humans. And then, Carter stood before the council to deliver humanity's message to the stars. "We are not here to conquer," he said, voice steady but filled with conviction. "We are here to protect what we've built, our families, our home, our future. But understand this, and know it well, if anyone dares to threaten us again, humanity will not back down. We will fight. And we will win." The message was clear. Humanity had earned its place among the stars, and no one, no matter their size or strength, could ever forget the name that now held the galaxy's utmost respect. The legacy of humanity. As Earth and its allies began to grow, so did the fear of what humanity was capable of. But there was something more that lingered in the minds of every species. It wasn't just fear that defined humanity's legacy. It was the resilience. The willingness to fight, not just for survival, but for what was right. The galaxy would never be the same. And the name that once belonged to the most feared predators in the universe now echoed across space as the name of a new species that had become the true rulers of the stars. Humanity.